Hello again, friends. I'm Jeff Holman. I'm the host of this awesome podcast called the Breakout CEO Podcast. And it's so good to be back with you. We've had a lot of stories over the last few weeks about breakout CEOs and their momentum, the stories they've been through. It's been fun hearing those stories. We're here again today with Natasha Todorovic, who's on the show to help share some stuff that we were just talking, Natasha, about some of the things you've done, the book you've written, and this concept of spiraling that a lot of CEOs go through, even if they don't publicize it. So I'm super excited to talk about the things that you've done with CEOs and to get into some of that today. So welcome to the show, Natasha.
Super excited to be here with you, Jeff. And I think I mentioned we have something in common, which is when our clients come to us. And usually as service providers, because we work with super smart clients who are super competent with great teams, they usually come to us a little late because they are so smart, they figured they could do it themselves.
That is so true. Yes. Early stage companies, in my case, especially, that they're like, hey, I don't have the money. I don't have the time. Like, maybe this will go away. And usually there's some amount of cleanup, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot once they bring our team in on the legal side. And as I'm sure you've seen on your end too.
Well, I love your fractional legal. I mean, that is so smart and that is so adaptive to what that client niche needs. So kudos to you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, just for the audience, I don't share it a whole lot, but the fractional legal team is really thank you for kind of introing that, Natasha. The fractional legal team is really about bringing a fully staffed legal team to startups and scaling businesses, because you've got all the same problems as everybody else does. Maybe not all at once, maybe not as many problems, but you have them. So we just staff a team that has the expertise to address those as they come up. So that, that was that. If I were to do a full podcast on my breakout moment, I think it's a story in progress. And that's definitely part of it, because I think you're right. The response from the market has been, hey, why don't more people do this? This seems like the right way to do it. And I agree, and I think more people should. So, but that's enough about me. Let's get into some of your background. What brought you to where you are today to talk on this show?
Oh, so many twists and turns.
Any spirals in there too?
So many spirals, so many spirals. The thing that got me into change, I was in the world of fashion. I was running a division, and this thing called NAFTA happened. And I was in Canada, I was in Montreal. There's a street where I always, would go to source my fabrics and stuff that I needed. And it was like double, triple parked, and people were running in and out. And it was like the marvelous Mrs. Maisel when she went to see her father-in-law, right? It was just honking and people yelling, and it was just so much fun. And in about a 2-week period, the factors which were financing most of these deals, there were, I think, 4 or 5 of them, they all closed.
Really?
It was shocking. And I think I drove to my street, and it was in the middle of the day. I think it was a Wednesday. It was maybe lunchtime, and there were no cars parked. Nobody was going in and out. It was a ghost town.
Silent, huh?
And my job was to predict what people were going to want 18 months in advance and have those fashions and garments and fabrics in front of them. And I sat there looking at the street, and I was in tears and said, how did I not predict this? And I never wanted to be flat-footed when it came to change again. Now, in that delusional self of Natasha way back then, I had a belief that if I could just, look at the crystal ball, I'd never be caught unawares again. And, you and I both know that that's not how the world works.
No, it's not. The political scene here in the U.S. might tell you that same thing today, right? It's not NAFTA today. Well, maybe revisiting some of NAFTA, perhaps, but all sorts of stuff going on.
It's a crazy scene. And I think the takeaway really is, after having been doing this, and I mean, I've flown nearly 2 million miles, I've delivered certifications in over 15 different countries, I've worked with leaders from over 50. The takeaway is, it's not that you're ever going to be able to predict everything. It is, what do you do when the surprises happen and the unexpected happens? How do you, in yourself and with your team, be agile, be resilient, be
Yeah.
adaptive, see around corners, understand what's happening? Because those who understand it first and those who react quickly are those who end up surviving.
Well, I want to hear more about that, but first, I'm kind of the mindset, and we had a guest on earlier, a few episodes back, John Richards. He talked about seeing patterns in things. I know we're
Love that
surprised by
episode.
these. What's that?
I love that episode. He was brilliant.
Well, yes, he shared some wonderful tidbits for us. He talked about patterns a little bit. Do you see that a lot of CEOs truly are surprised when things change, or do they have either some conscious or some subconscious pattern recognition going on leading up to this? Because I have to think there's maybe a mix out there.
Love that question. And I think if you ask most people, they would say that their skill is in seeing these patterns. But what patterns are you seeing?
Yeah,
Because in the world of fashion way back then, I could see the patterns of clothing, but I could not see the out west, the lumberjacks were saying, oh, this is going to be terrible. Well, if you're in the world of fashion, nobody listens to lumberjacks.
fair enough.
Right? But they saw what was coming, right? So we each track for different patterns. We're
Yeah.
skilled in that way. You track for legal vulnerabilities. And I track for these patterns in human nature.
Okay, interesting. And every CEO has their own skill set, and some are better at probably seeing the different layers versus maybe hyper focusing on the one layer that they're involved in. So I'm sure it varies. And is this I don't want to jump ahead, but is this a little bit where spirals might come into play?
This is where we're spiraling and we're dynamicing, Jeff. So yeah, no, absolutely. My brand Spiral Dynamics refers to two things. The spiral is human nature. How do we grow? How do we develop? How do we lead? How do we form culture organizationally? For most people, it's totally unconscious and unintentional. It works because they did a few things and they think they made it work. But they don't know quite exactly what they did. And for others, it's like all hell's breaking loose and they don't know what happened or how to fix it. So that's the human nature piece. And then the dynamics piece is, how do we evolve and change? And this work actually goes back to the 1950s. My late husband's mentor was researching the nature of human nature. So over 30 years, he took the research and realized that it pointed to, everything that's human, almost everything that's human related, how we think, how we organize, how we cohere, how we conflict, is related to development. And so that's the spiral and the dynamics, the changing nature of human nature.
That's interesting. And the dynamics or the spiraling, of course, can be probably directional, upward, downward, maybe sideways. I don't know, but we're always kind of in motion. It was funny. It reminds me of something that maybe off topic, but I had an MBA professor one time, and I think for 7 or 8 years, he had been teaching this lesson about Star Wars, and at one point, I think it was Yoda said something like, "The future is always emotion." And when he said that, I'm like, I perked up, and the journalist in our class, he actually perked up and spoke up, and he said, "I think it's not emotion, it's in motion. The future is always in motion. Like emotion, that'd be a good lesson. It's just not what Yoda said. So, but I think that's what you're getting at we're just in our history, does what it does, but looking forward, we're looking at motion, the dynamics, the spirals, like we have to be able to take that, and we know it's going to keep moving. Like we talked a little bit before about some companies, large scale companies that everybody knows about, who maybe didn't really think that they had to move as everything else was in motion. Maybe share a few of those with us.
Yeah, I think we were talking about Kodak, right?
Yes, Kodak.
And
Yes, I also
yeah,
was thinking of Netflix and the Blockbuster and stuff like that. Like,
well, all of them, yes. Well, and that's what creates us as humans, that we
yeah,
have these pressures in the world, and then we have a way internally of thinking and processing, and then the world changes. And
yes,
some humans adapt with that world as it changes, and some don't. And so the CEO of Kodak had come from, I think it was HP, and they were bought into, believed with all of their heart, mind, and soul that the next generation of Kodak people were going to go to the mall and they were going to want to print their memories, right? And this is happening in a world where everyone was taking pictures and storing them on Facebook and sharing them, and they missed that. And it was early, it wasn't part of their experience. They didn't believe what they were seeing. They had digital cameras, but they completely missed the signals in the environment, and they down spiraled when, in a world that was up spiraling in complexity, they just separated and missed the world.
yeah. I think we've heard a lot of stories about those CEOs. Is that a lack of ability to see what's going on, or is it just not appreciating the scale of what's happening? Like, why would a CEO, whether it's a Kodak CEO or a CEO of a small company out there building a niche product for a very targeted market, like why do these people miss these? It's not because they're bad CEOs, right? They're very talented people, but what is it? What kind of comes together that results in a smart CEO otherwise missing some of these signals?
So you're asking me to get into some of my research.
Oh,
So one of the things we miss what I call life conditions, right?
okay.
We're like fish. We float in our water, and we think the water is the water is the water. And then there are these little symptoms, these very quiet little signals that happen. And some people pick up on them and they build huge companies around them, and
Hmm.
others miss them. And, that's that combination between our cognitive biases, our blind spots,
Yeah.
and our belief in what we are seeing. And if we totally believe it's not something that counts and keep going as if something else does and focus on different signals and maybe ignore the team or maybe ignore opposition, or we ignore different people telling us things, because a lot of successful CEOs got there because they were smart. And because they're smart, they're confident in their smarts, and they've made a lot of good moves. And I remember one who he was taking his company public, and they were having some challenges up ahead of the IPO. And one of the engineers said, "Don't worry, boss, I've got it handled. If we do this, it'll all work fine." And that certainty really gave him comfort. And then there was another engineer who would have led the team who said, "Hey, boss, it isn't that easy. It's not that comfortable. It's going to be a lot harder than you guys think. But I think we could do it. We just need to extend things a little bit." And so, which one do you think he chose to lead the initiative?
Well, if he's like most CEOs, he wants the confident person to do it. He's got deadlines to meet. He's got investors to satisfy. Maybe quarterly, maybe not quarterly, but internal, regular reporting to try to hit his goals, get his bonus. I mean, I think most people would say, this guy seemed really confident. Let's go there.
And that's what he did. And what do you think happened after that?
Well, probably the reason it's a story is because it didn't end the same way that it started. Tell us the ending.
Well, so what happened was not only did they miss their deadlines, the IPO struggled through with a few hiccups, but they lost an engineering team of about, I think it was 12 or 18 programmers.
Really? Just lost confidence in the CEO, or why is that?
Because they were treated very badly. The whole thing was roughshod over the engineers, and they didn't want to be part of shortcuts and bad decisions.
They didn't. Yeah, they didn't want to release the product that wasn't ready to be released yet.
And they had better offers available to them at Microsoft and Google and other companies. So it was a choice to be somewhere where they weren't respected and weren't trusted, or getting better positions somewhere where they were.
Well, did this CEO in this scenario, did he have, or she have, a peer, a right-hand person to help guide this, or, what should this person have done, or what could they have done in this situation? Because you're really taking your team at face value, right? This team member says one thing, this team member says another thing. What were other alternatives that they might have explored?
Yeah, I think in the run up to an IPO, you've got a lot of pressures, and you want to make the right choices. You want to move fast. You want to make decisions to get faster to the bigger decisions. And this is one of those moments where you need to sit back and go, am I saying yes to something because I want this security, or am I saying yes because this is actually going to happen? And one of the things I always caution my clients in being wary of is that confidence is not competence. And just because somebody sells you something that you want to hear doesn't mean you're making the right moves. So we have to sometimes take all that confidence and all that certainty, step back and go, what if this is wrong? What if there's a better way? What are we missing? What if those other voices that said something different actually have a bigger part of this picture? So it's taking a pause when we least want to pause.
Well, I think a lot of people at that stage too, the phrase that you hear a lot of, or at least I hear pretty frequently now, is, what does the data say? And so there's this aspect of confidence and assumed competence perhaps, but really, what does the data say? And I've seen some pretty large businesses that seem to operate without a lot of data. I don't know if it's always, but a lot of times these types of vision run companies that lack data to back up the vision, they seem to get themselves into financial trouble. They seem to end up in lawsuits. They seem to try to stretch the truth to cover a gap that, maybe the data would have said something. So I think, at least from what I've seen, data is sometimes where people would turn and say, well, we like what you're saying, but we need some data behind this. Is that one of the solutions here, or?
What is the right data for the right problem? Because very often what organizations do is they take data and then they apply that data to somewhere where it doesn't belong. And I've been presenting human nature data and change data and teaching people how to use that for a long time. Mm-hmm. And what's remarkable is how often when people don't like the data, they'll ignore it or they'll rationalize it to mean something else.
Yeah.
So it's not only taking the right data, measuring the right things, but being informed by it even when it's inconvenient and undesirable. And I'll give you an example of that. One of my clients was working with a senior exec team of Siemens, and they had their entire change strategy mapped out. They were excited. They were having fun. They thought it was going to be the coolest thing since sliced bread. And he calls me, it was like 10 o'clock at night, and he's like, Natasha, I think we have a problem. I'm like, what's up? He says, would you just look at this data for me? Okay. And I'm like, okay. So we had the exec team data, and then we had the team that needed to implement the change and their change data. And I was like, I see. And it was different. They preferred change to be different. They had different challenges. And he said, what do I do? So we went through how he might present it and the different things that he could do. You know, kudos to him. He was up till, whatever it was, 4 a.m. He got up at 6, and then he went into his day with the exec team. And he presented it in a way where they looked at it, they looked at themselves, they took a pause, and understanding that in roughly 70% of change initiatives and cases that they fail. So understanding that they saw their data, they saw their team's data, and they were like, wow, this is never going to work. And he was like, right. He said, then they said, well, we need to go back to the drawing board. And he said, you're right.
Is that because the team was able to see the risks involved? Or, you know what I'm saying? I'm always kind of fascinated between the concept of people driving towards success versus people driving away from risks. I'm not sure those are always the same thing. And it sounds like what you're saying is this person, I think, and I'm maybe filling in some blanks here, I think they said they looked at the data and they said, hey, we got a big risk here because this data doesn't match this data. And we're we need an outside perspective. Call Natasha. You agreed with them. And so it seems like they were identifying problems, not necessarily knowing the solution yet, but wanting to avoid the consequences that might come from the problem. Is that a fair way to say it?
One of my big soapbox items is congruence. We, as leaders can lead those with whom they have psychosocial congruence. People choose their leaders. And when we design change, when we design a new strategy or a new pathway or a new playbook, we need to design it with the reality of our culture and our people in mind. And sometimes what happens in the boardroom or in an executive retreat is it all sounded wonderful. We design it using our mirrors. And then we try to deploy it onto a culture that is not motivated that way.
Yeah.
So when we, without divulging the data, let me do it this way. If you can have the perfect strategy, if it's not adapted for where your people are, let's say there were, 20 different changes and everybody's change fatigued, you're not going to be able to pile on one more thing. It'll just fall flat and people will be like, I can't do this. I'm done. I'm burned out. So you've got to hear the rhythm in the music and play to where they are. And then you can pick it up so that they go along with it as long as you're attuned to where your people are. So it's this dance between the vision of the future that the CEO has and the leadership and executive team have, what they are motivated by, and the teams that need to make that happen and then keep it going once it happens. And if you've got congruence across those different groups of people, it'll work. But most organizations go, we have this idea, we're going to tell people what to do, we're going to ignore the people who are resisting because it's just resistance and they'll get with the program and you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet and all the stuff you've heard.
Yes.
And then it doesn't happen and then they go, well, call it a success. And then they go into the next one and the next one. And then what they're doing is they're teaching their teams how to respond to those initiatives.
So how does a company, because again, I think a lot of our audience they're fast paced, very smart people building things quickly. They're kind of the, build fast, break things type of audience. And some of them might just say, well, listen, we are going to break some eggs. We don't know if this is the right model. But it seems to me like if they could take away some steps or some type of, I don't know, a framework or something that they could say, well, okay, yes, I'm going to move fast. Something's going to break, but we don't need to break things that we don't need to break. Like, how would one of these scaling CEOs in a fast moving company, like, what are the things they should stop and say, okay, before we do this, how do I assess my congruence with my team? How do I, like, what are the 2 or 3 things? Like, do I have congruence and should I move forward with this? Or do I need to get congruence first? It reminds me of times when early in my career, when I was invited into board meetings, I'm working with the executive team very closely. I see the board members less often. And there were a couple of moments where it hit me very, very hard. Sometimes me more directly, and sometimes seeing other people who had gone into these meetings without making sure there was congruence across the parties that really mattered in the meeting they were in. And so, what would a fast moving CEO of a, whether it's a 10-person team or a 100-person team, how do they maybe ensure a little bit more that they've got congruence, even though they're moving fast?
So we have a playbook.
Good.
But one of the things we've already talked about is what is happening in the world in which you're playing. Mm-hmm. Are there changes in the world that you're tracking, or are you missing those changes? What's happening with competitors, and are you following? Are you missing changes? And really paying attention to that environment in which your organization must thrive. Because if your organization is not built for that environment, your organization will not thrive. Then the next piece is asking, who is leading whom? And we've got a process, and we've got data, and we've got diagnostics and psychometrics that measure this, but we look at, is there congruence between the leaders and their teams? Okay. And if there is, we let them know, and if there isn't, we let them know. But in the people, who should lead whom? The whom is the culture. The whom are the people who are choosing to follow that leader. The whom are the people who are making all the different pieces come together every day, and how they work together and what they create as a kind of living organism. Yeah. And then there's the why that drives all of this, the vision, the mission, the purpose, the reason for this organization. And we answer all those questions before we ever look at the how question.
So putting
the
that
how question is last. How do we do this? We don't know how we do it until we know our market, till we know how we fit in the market, till we know who we are, till we know our vision, and a few other pieces, till we know our timing for it. And then we figure out the congruent how. Does that help?
Yeah, no, that helps a lot. I think because I'm reframing in my mind as you speak, I think a lot of people say, well, this is what I want. Now I got to get the team on board. And what you're saying is, wait a second, let's not try to force the team into the how. Let's get the congruence and then figure out if this how or another how is the right how. Am I getting that?
Yeah, the team may already be super stoked and excited about moving fast and breaking a bunch of things, right? You got the green light, just go, right? But then how do you pick them up when things haven't worked? How do you deal with the deflated down spiraling with failure after failure?
Yeah.
How do you take those lessons? How do you take people who are super smart because you hired talented people and lead them through those dark night of the soul moments when they failed? And that creates either that down spiral where they kind of pull back and they don't want to play the game anymore, or they're tired, and it creates more of an up spiral. Well, we're going to try the next thing until it works or when it works.
Yeah, that I like that. I also like how before you said that the whom is the culture. I think I said that right. The whom is the culture. It reminds me of the first follower concept. And if you don't have a follower, you don't have much. You're not doing much leading if you're not followed by anyone. And so making sure you got that follower there, and that because that follower draws it.
The followers choose their leaders.
Yeah.
You might be signing checks and people might be nodding and saying yes, but positional power is not inspirational power. And it's certainly not psychosocial congruence of you being the leader that your people have chosen.
Yeah. Would it be too simple to say we're really talking about some version of unity? You need unity in your team. And if you have a team that's not united behind the vision, behind the purpose, doesn't gel well together, mesh well together, you're just going to continually struggle.
As long as your team isn't working on all cylinders, you're going to struggle. You can have, and here's a tip, and I think this is really really important. You can have a high-performing team, and there are only probably 10-15% of teams that are high-performing, and it ebbs and flows, right? You can bring them back, or you can bring them back to high performance, but you've got to watch those ebbs and flows. And if you inject these bad apple behaviors, you can take a super high-performing team and kill it. And that's just one person doing things in these sorts of bad apple ways. I'm not saying the person is a bad apple, that they are behaving in these ways that just suck the life out of the team. And we've got to be attentive to that so that your high-performing team stays high-performing.
Yeah. It's just that incongruence. It's not a character flaw necessarily, but if they manifest those incongruences with the team, that can throw the team out of its high-performing mode.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We had an organization we worked with, and economy dipped. They had about 350 people. It was the hardest, most painful decision that they'd ever made in their history. And that was to fire, 90 people. I think it was 86 people. And I write that in my book. And what they did that was really different was they invited people to volunteer for firing. Mm-hmm. And what they promised them, because they prided themselves on being a network organization, being very well connected and relationally astute, they promised that everyone would find a new home. And that worked for, I think, everyone minus 3 or 4 people.
Okay.
And what that did, they, in their heart and soul, they belonged to this organization. And they were a consulting firm. They did kind of the fractional project manager thing for their clients often. And they were so cultured, they were so tight as an organization that even when people had gone, they hadn't gone. They were still pulled into projects. Probably, I think it was maybe 3-4 years later, for a few years in a row, they won I think it was Best Place to Work. It was European. Wow. So Best Place to Work, they were top 3 years in a row.
Because they really had that nailed down for their culture, how they treated their people, staying united despite struggles. Like that.
Yeah, their CEO was their chief emotional officer.
Oh, very tuned in. Very tuned in, yeah. Oh, that's very cool. Well, this has been fantastic. There's so much here that I think CEOs can take away if they were to focus on one aspect of what you've said today. Where should they start? Because I do think a lot of CEOs in these scaling businesses, they're under a lot of pressure. They're moving fast. They've got 9 things to do and time for 2 today, and the other 7 might never get done. Like what's that starting point that you would suggest to them?
Your through line is your people. And I'll always remember this example. So Jeff Weiner, LinkedIn, he had entire sections of his calendar blanked out. And when he was asked, like, do you have nothing to do? Right? Of course he has things to do.
Right.
He said, look, I need to think deeply about my key people. I need to think about how they're developing, where they're going, and how I support them. So if you want your organization to move forward, it runs through your people. You have to know them deeply, because they're the ones who are going to they're going to win the dream, or you're going to limp over the finish line, hopefully.
Yeah. If at all. No, that reminds me, in a previous episode with Earl Foote, who runs a MSP, he just put so much emphasis that you two would be great friends, because he didn't call himself the chief emotional officer, but he's the CEO that has such a passion. Like it's clear that he's put time and attention and effort and money into doing, I think, what you've said. He didn't call it congruency, but I think he's, the focus is on the culture and the team and building that congruency, even if you call it something else. So that's very, I think I'm seeing this trend, even though I'm so few episodes into this already.
Well, I'll leave you with this. One of the pieces of research that we've done around the world, big organizations, small organizations in Latin America, North America, in Europe, in South Africa, in Australia, around the world, is what we have found is 35, for most teams and most organizations, individuals are contributing 35 to 40% of their potential. Not because that's what they want, but because that's all the organization is willing to accept. And no one goes to work and no one goes to an organization saying, I'm just giving you this 35% and I'm saving the best stuff for last.
That's certainly not a good employee, huh?
No, they don't. They truly don't. And they're going in because not only do they want to contribute all of who they are, they want to grow as a human being. They want to leave value. They want to give positive impact. And if you look at your organization and you're looking at every single human being and realizing that they're giving you 35 to 40% because that's all you're asking and that's all your environment is prompting them to give, think how much faster and how much more creative things could be if you could tap into that and grow it.
Yeah, no, that's a lofty, maybe achievable, but lofty goal for a lot of us. Well, it's been wonderful having you on here, Natasha. I'm sure companies would like to know a little bit more about how to contact you, how to get in touch with you, maybe hire you, maybe buy your book. Give us a little bit of rundown on where they can connect with you in those ways.
I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. You can find me at Natasha Todorovic-Cowan, maybe in the show notes. And if you don't mind, I'd love to send you the link to my book and
yeah, for sure,
it in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll include any of those links in there. So
yeah, it's called Making Change Work. And it's got some stories, it's got some case studies, it's got some tools and templates, and it's got a few really interesting cases. So yeah. Thank you for asking, Jeff.
Yeah, no, and a lot of stuff I'm sure today would carry over from the book into your businesses. This has been an amazing episode. Really, you brought some. I can't say that I haven't had any guests yet that haven't kind of enlarged my own thinking. Just thinking about my own small business, the clients that I work with. I'm always amazed at how much there is to do and how many areas there are for improvement and, for real opportunity in business. So thank you for, like many guests, expanding my own perspective in these ways.
Every business is a people business.
I love it. Well, thank you to you and also to our audience for the Breakout CEO podcast. It's another week, and we've had a great time listening to Natasha. We'll put those show notes into the show notes. We'll get this posted soon, and look forward to having you on our next episode, having more guests like you on our episodes to come. Thanks so much.
It's truly been an honor and a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you, Natasha.